Hello and welcome back to Own Guard Solutions. This time we continue yet again our series on field stripping and cleaning some popular firearms, dare I say. And today is no exception. Today we have one of my favorite firearms to work with, to break down and show you what I do to clean it. This is my personal Ruger 10/22 carbine, 22 caliber. I've had this thing forever. Not to date myself, but my dad gave me this rifle for Christmas when I was 13 years old, and it's been just a fantastic gun. Suffice it to say, this was my first real rifle that I had back in the day, and it's just stood the test of time. Suffice it to say, it's probably still as accurate, or I'm sure it's just as accurate as it ever was. Reliable to a T. What a fantastic firearm. And I got to give an honorable mention to the, what is this thing? It is a Bushnell Sport View 3 through 7 power 20 millimeter. I had to give it a mention. My dad bought me that and put it on this thing. And it's seen a lot of action over the years. When I was younger, I killed a lot of squirrels, some rabbits with it. Kind of moved away from hunting, but it's certainly shot its share of paper targets over the years too. And I thought, what better firearm to bring on here and show you how to break it down, how I clean it, and then some things to look out for as we go. So with that, we'll get started. So stick around. So before we get too far into the weeds, I want to go through the basic safety checks with you, show that the firearm is clear, unloaded, and ready to be worked on. Again, I'll say this ad nauseum across all of these videos. I don't even have ammunition or magazines in the same room for this firearm or any firearm that I'm working on or cleaning. The magazine has been removed. Of course, it is on safety, and the bolt is locked in the back position. Looking down into the chamber, I can see that it's clear, free of any rounds being in the chamber, so I can indeed verify this firearm is unloaded and ready to be cleaned and worked on. So as we move along today, I'm going to insert some photos, hopefully some clear, closer up photos so you can see what I'm referencing. First and foremost, I want to point out, you can see in the photo that I'm bringing up now, is the barrel band, the barrel strap as I call it. There is one single slotted screw or bolt, if you will, flat screw to be removed. That way you can remove the belt off of the end of the stock and slide it over the barrel. You want to be careful doing that so you don't scratch up your barrel as you go. But I wanted to show you that screw. It takes a flathead screwdriver to back it out. You don't have to take it out all of the way to loosen up. You just want it all so you can easily slide it off. So that's the first thing I want to show you here. Okay, next is the takedown screw. The takedown screw can be found here, just forward of the magazine well. In this case, in this older 10/22, it is a slotted screw, partial threaded screw, which makes it really nice. You just need to back it out enough to where the screw almost comes out. The only way to get the screw all the way out is to back it out most of the way until it catches it again, and then it catches its threads again, and then you can finish backing it out. But that's not necessary. You just need to unscrew it enough to have it come loose, and you would see that. So you don't have, this screw isn't meant to be taken all the way out, although you can. But you don't need to break this firearm down. The other thing to point out too, and you can see in the picture better than you can here, I'm sure, is that this is again a slotted screw, a slotted partial screw. Many of the 10/22 models actually come with an Allen bolt instead, an Allen screw instead, which means you can use an Allen wrench instead of a flathead screwdriver, and that's probably just going to make it better so you don't run the risk of your flathead screwdriver slipping off and scratching up your hardwood stock in this case, for example. They make Allen, if yours happens to be a slotted like this, they happen to make a lot of aftermarket Allen head partial screws that are meant to replace this. So they make, I think, a stainless, and then they make a blackened you can find. But this is the slotted. I haven't replaced this one just because I've kept this Firearm 100% original and plan on keeping it that way. Okay, now we're ready to get started field stripping and breaking down this 1022. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, in order to remove the barrel band, I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and loosen this screw up. And I want to be careful that my flathead screwdriver doesn't slip so I don't scratch or mar the metal band itself, or most importantly, my nice solid hardwood stock in this case. You know, Ruger's been making the 1022 since 1964, and they have now made millions upon millions. I think maybe even over 8 million 1022s at this point in time. So I just removed the barrel band, you can see there. And again, you don't need to take that screw off. You're just trying to loosen enough to slide it off the end of the stock and over your barrel. And you just want to be careful as you pull that up and over the barrel, as you saw me doing, not to get it up against and scratch up your stock, or more importantly, scratch up your nice blued barrel there. But yeah, so they're in the millions of these things since 1964, and they haven't changed a whole lot at all as far as their basic inner workings. They are semi-automatic, if I didn't point that out earlier, so you could argue not as accurate as a bolt action, but believe me, this thing is plenty accurate enough. Much like mine, you can still find these in solid hardwood stocks. These days you're probably going to pay, well, you are going to pay more for a solid hardwood stock than you would, say, a laminate, but you can get them in hardwood stocks. I think they even still make a walnut for the 1022. You can get this thing in laminate, you can get it in polymer, you can get it in just about any configuration you want to. You can get bull barrels for them, you can get stainless steel barrels. You can get takedown where they break in half essentially and fit into a nice little backpack, and then they make a whole bunch of competition level, competition outfitted 1022s as well. So just a great platform for sure. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to turn it upside down and go to the takedown screw here, and in my case it is a slotted screw. I'm going to need to use a flathead screwdriver, obviously, to get that out. It is a partial screw, which means while it can be removed, and there I go, I'm going to scratch up my stock if I'm not careful. While it can be fully removed, it doesn't, you don't have to. And so this screw is meant just to, let me get my strap out of the way, be loosened. And so you don't have to pull it out of the way. If you want, if you don't have to take it all the way out. If you wanted to, you just simply pull it all the way and then go back to screwing it again. But we don't need to do that. So we can leave this partial takedown screw in. Just a tidbit secret of getting the barrel and the receiver out of the stock. It's going to come all out together at once. A couple of things to note here. You want to set your safety at about the halfway point, or the halfway point, I should say. The reason being is because if it's all the way safe or it's all the way on fire, when you go to pull the receiver and barrel out of the stock, you might hit your stock and put dents or scratches around your stock here. So you definitely want to try to do that. At least I do. And then as you pull the barrel and the receiver from the stock, you want to make sure your pins in here that you'll see here in a minute don't fall out everywhere, because over time as you take them in and out they will loosen up. So that's a very real possibility. So I've got my safety here halfway. I'm going to assume my pins are going to cooperate with me, and I'm going to pull this off the barrel and the receiver out. It looks like my pins are behaving. So now I've got the receiver and the barrel, and of course my scope I didn't take off because I'm being lazy. And I've got my stock that I'm just going to set down here. Very nice hardwood stock. And now I have my trigger housing and the receiver, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trigger housing out of the receiver. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we're back with the 1022 field stripping. So the next thing we've got to do after we've removed the receiver and barrel from the stock is we want to punch out these two receiver pins here. And again, over time they may get easier to punch out, especially if you keep CLP and any kind of protectant on them, which you should. I find them pretty easy to be taken out. Dare I say, they even like to fall out a lot of the times. This is why when you're taking it out of the stock or putting them back in the stock, you want to be mindful and watch that the pins don't fall out. I like to remove pins from left to right, meaning if I look in the direction of the barrel, that would be forward. Therefore, this is the left-hand side of the receiver. And so what I want to do is, personally, I like to be in the habit of, when I'm removing pins, to go from left to right, and then when I'm putting pins back in, from right to left. And so, without dropping them out, hopefully, just try to show you this. So again, the barrel's in that direction. So this is the right-hand side or the east side. If I'm putting pins in, I want to come in from this direction. But in our case right now, I want to remove them. So I'm going to go from left to right or from west to east. And I like to do that. Many contend that it's not really important for the 1022 since these pins are uniform in their diameter across their length. But many firearms do have tapered pins and whatnot. And so I just, instead of worrying about what firearm I'm taking pins out of, if I follow that rule from left to right for removal and right to left to insert, I'm probably going to be safe more often than not. So with that, I'll shut up. We'll knock these out. They don't take a lot of force. Like I said, they're pretty easy to go. Let's see if that's even enough now. Yep, you see them coming through. Yep, there's one. Just going to set these aside. And I want to hold this trigger guard in place while I do this, just to pull this out. I'm going to set that one aside. And now my trigger guard's pretty much just going to fall out on its own. Okay. And you can see I have some extra CLP in here. Probably wipe that off as we speak. I have, in all transparency, I have cleaned this more recently, so I'm not going through the cleaning motions. But just a note, anytime you see metal on metal wear, you're probably going to see the bluing or the paint coating of any sort worn off. And so those are places that I want to be sure to get extra lubrication on. Again, when it comes, for me, lubricating here on the hammer too, you can see some coating missing. So I like to get a little there. The ejector fits here in this slot. Usually, a lot of times when you take the trigger housing out, the ejector will come loose and flop about. When you're going to put it back in, you just want to make sure that ejector's back in. It's a little housing there up front. You can kind of see the slot. Hopefully the lighting will show it to you. That slot there. You just want to make sure that ejector stays in there. But I'm looking for points of wear so I know where to add some extra CLPs or some lubricant. Some argue that it should be so little that it's dry and just slick to the touch. I'm okay if it's a little wet. And then, you know, if I get too much on, I can always wipe it off later. The reason why we're trying to avoid too much lubrication is because when we go to shoot it, depending on how often we find ourselves cleaning, you know, that gunpowder, lead, and carbon can mix in with excessive lubricant and create a sludge, basically, and that can hamper the performance or even cause some malfunctions in your firearm. So any firearm we're cleaning, we don't want to have too much lubrication, but we certainly want to have enough. And again, these points of obvious wear are places we want to focus. So I want to take a minute here now that we've got the trigger guard out, and we can see some other points of wear here too. Now that we've got the trigger guard out, I want to make the point that according to the user manual for the 1022, this is as far as I need to break this firearm down for regular maintenance and cleaning. I do not have to go any further than this. In other words, I don't have to take the bolt or the bolt rod out or any of that, the guide rod, the spring. I don't have to take any of that out. I can simply clean this thing at this point. But we're going to take it on from here. I also want to mention too that Ruger recommends that you not break down your trigger housing any further. I know I've been saying trigger guard, but obviously the trigger housing keeps the trigger guard as a part of that. So Ruger recommends that you do not break this down. And for regular routine maintenance, there's really no reason to break down the trigger housing, get into all of that. It goes without saying, you need to know what you're doing, and if not, then get this to a certified gunsmith that does know what they're doing. So we've gotten the firearm down as far as we need to for cleaning. One more thing I want to try to point out here, it's going to be kind of difficult, but this is the back of the receiver. Many of these receivers, especially aftermarket receivers, come with a hole punched in it that enables you to get a cleaning rod through here so that you can actually go through the chamber into the barrel out through to the muzzle. But you can see in this case there is no hole. So if I don't have a bore snake or similar, I'm going to need to work through the muzzle end, and like we talked about, you just want to be careful with the crown up here if you're going to have to do that. Again, my suggestion would be to get yourself a bore snake or similar, and it's really simple to go through the chamber here. One more point of note, these two screws here, which are Allen heads, if you take those out and the bolt block here, sorry, not the bolt block, the barrel lock or block here, you can remove the barrel from the receiver, but again, for basic cleaning, there's no reason to do that. If you do take the barrel off, or for that matter, the scope off the receiver, you're likely going to have to sight this firearm in again when you get through cleaning it, and that's what personally I'm trying to avoid here today. So stay tuned and we'll show you how to get that bolt out and all the goodies inside of the receiver next. So the next thing I want to show you, hopefully you're seeing in the picture here, I tried to get it up close. You're looking at a top-down view of my workspace, my table. But what I'm trying to show you here is the end of the barrel, the business end as I like to call it, officially the muzzle. And you'll see there the opening, and that's the barrel. That's the last place the bullet, that's the place where the bullet comes out. And the lip there, the edge of the barrel there on the muzzle is called the crown. And it's critical that we're careful not to damage the crown when we try to clean from this end of the barrel, from the muzzle end to the chamber, because we don't want to scratch up or burr up that crown. The reason being is because the crown there at the end of the barrel is the last point a bullet comes in contact with the barrel as it exits. And if there's any burrs or scratches there, there is the potential to impact in a negative fashion your accuracy, however slight. So you would really want to be careful when using cleaning rods to this end. Unfortunately, with the 1022, at least this particular model and some other stock or original manufacturing, they don't have a hole in the back of the receiver to run a cleaning rod through so that you can go through the barrel from the chamber to the muzzle. So what I recommend doing, if you can, is instead use a bore snake or similar. And with a bore snake, you can get through the chamber and go to the end and don't have to worry about that with the muzzle. If you are going to use a cleaning rod, just know a lot of the time you are going to need to go through the muzzle end, and it's critical to make sure everything that you feed down into the barrel from the muzzle end, you've got an alignment and you work to steer clear of damaging that crown as best you can. Okay, we're back. So I've got the trigger housing out, and now I'm going to go ahead and take the bolt out. Even though I don't have to do it, I really want to get in here and clean this up in here well. There's a lot of wear on the roof of the receiver that I want to make sure I get plenty of CLP and lubricant on to help mitigate some of that. So let's do this next. So the first thing we're going to do is take out this bolt stop pin here. You can tell it's a larger diameter than the receiver pins were, and I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to go in from the left-hand side. Again, the barrels go in that direction. I'm going to come in here on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to tap on this a little bit. Over time, it should get easier, will get easier, so I don't have to hit it a lot. Should have come through the other side. Oh, it's already out. So there's that out. So now I've got all 3 pins, and now we're going to work on getting the bolt and the charging handle out next. Okay, and we're back. So now that we've got the trigger housing out of the receiver, that's as far as we need to go to do any sort of routine maintenance or cleaning, which is what we want to do today. But I do want to show you how to go ahead and take it down further. So if you did want to clean your bolt and your guide rod and your charging handle, you could do that. So in this case, my charging handle is still forward as the bolt is forward, resting against the chamber. So the first thing I want to do is take the receiver in one hand, and with the thumb of my left hand, I'm going to push back on the bolt. And as I do that, I'm going to reach in here, and I don't want to let go of this charging handle because I do not want to get my finger trapped between the bolt and the chamber. I'm going to simply put my index finger ahead of the, at the front of the bolt and lift up, and the bolt simply comes out like that. And then what I'm going to do is gently let the charging handle go. You could see the recoil spring there on the guide rod. And what I'm going to do here is just simply pull it through the side just like that. Just one thing to the ejection port here. The one thing I want to mention is here on the end of the guide rod, you can kind of see there's a tip there. And that tip, I'm going to get my punch and show you, that tip goes right in the end of this piece here. I don't know if you can see it too well, but there is a small dimple here in this piece. And so when we get ready to put the guide rod back in, we're going to go back exactly through the port the way we took it out. And we're going to make sure that tip is in alignment with that piece back there, and that tip pretty much goes into that dimple. But at this point, we've got the bolt out, the trigger housing out, the bolt out, and now the charging handle and guide rod, etc. You can see that while the gun's fairly clean, because I did clean it recently, you can tell the roof of the receiver has seen some wear and tear from that bolt, and that's completely normal, perfectly fine. There's just wearing of the blue or coating that Ruger used on this firearm. It just means that I want to make sure to get some lubrication back on that to make sure that's as coated as best I can. And so now we're going to take this opportunity again, because I don't have a hole back here on the back of this original OEM receiver. I can't run a cleaning rod through this direction. So I would have to go through the muzzle end. I just want to be careful so I don't mess up the crown if I do have to do that. But again, I strongly encourage you to use a bore snake or similar, because you can see how easy it would be to feed down in the tube. So while we're here, not going to go through the process of punching the bore. Hopefully you have seen that enough now, you're comfortable. But I am going to take this opportunity while the bolt's out to go ahead and get a little lubrication down here on the roof of the receiver, because I can clearly see metal and metal wear. And again, as I mentioned before, anytime we see metal and metal wear, that's okay. It just means that that's a good place and a good time for us to put some lubrication and make sure we get all of that coated. So that's what I'm doing now. Now, to get it back in, to get the charging handle and the recoil spring and the guide rod, which are in this case are all one piece here, I'm simply going to go back through the ejection port the way that I took it out. And again, I'm going to make sure that tip lines up and goes into that small shallow dimple back there. Oops, missed it. Piece right back there. And then to put the bolt in, I'm going to simply reverse what I did, except this time I'm going to go forward to get it to drop down in there like so, okay? And now the bolt's back in place. Now what I've got to do is get the charging handle to seat itself on at the top side of the bolt. You have to remember now, this is the bottom side of the bolt. There's a notch across here. Let me see if I can't get that out again. So that charging handle here, now that I got my piece out, fits into this piece here. So once we drop this bolt in, like so, what we need to do now is get that charging handle underneath and seated down into that slot in the bolt. So the way that I like to do that is you can try to pull back on the charging handle. It's not very easy to do because there's tension working against that guide rod for you in this case. So what I like to do is while I'm pushing back on the charging handle with maybe my thumb, I take my index finger in here and at the same time pull back on the piece that's attached to the guide rod so that I can evenly pull back. And at the same time, what I'm going to need to do is lift up my bolt so I can get the charging handle underneath that, like so. It's a little cumbersome here, working everything. And then you're going to keep some tension on the charging handle, and then you're going to hear it or feel it drop into place. And you'll know it when it's there. There we go. And when you know it's there, the bolt will come home because that spring is constantly under tension, wanting to relax itself going in that direction, which is what brings the bolt home. And you'll know you're there because now the bolt is back into place and working as we would expect it to. So next thing we'll do is put in the bolt stop pin again. And so, like I said before, this time we're going to work it from the right-hand side or the east side of the receiver and put it back in there pretty much the way we can bet that it went in the first time in its life. Get all the stuff off, so I'm just taking the pin. And I'd probably, yeah, I'm not even going to need to, well, I might need to hit it a little bit. I'm just going to drift it ever so slightly to get it back in there. This one actually may want to stay. And so my goal is to get it as flush as possible. And you can see it's out the other side. So now that's my bolt stop pin in place. So all of that's back together, looking good. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to take my trigger housing and work to get it back in similarly. Again, I want to make sure, in this case it's already there, but just to take it out to show you, I want to make sure my ejector goes back into its little home there, that little slot. Might have to line it up on the back there on that rod, make sure that's good to go. And then what I'm going to do is just set it in there. And I should be able to get these pins to go in pretty easily. Yep, that one went right in. Let's see if this one does the same for us. Oh yeah, there we go, perfect. So I've got my bolt stop pin and I've got my two receiver pins back in. The trigger housing's good to go and back in place. Now, as you just maybe saw there, these pins can have a tendency to fall back out on their own once they're in. So you just want to be cognizant of that, kind of keep your finger over them, otherwise you'll just need to pick them up and push them back in again. And now I'm going to wipe this thing down a little bit and get it ready to go back in the stock, so stick around. Okay, and we're back here. Just a couple of things before we put everything back into the stock again is, again, be cognizant of those pins. They can be slippery little buggers and just want to fall out. You had to knock them out with a pin and hammer, but they tend to fall out on their own after that first couple of times. So be cognizant of that. Of course, before we put it back into the receiver, we want to make sure our safety is about the 50-50 spot. Although it doesn't matter quite as much this time because we won't be banging up, we don't have to worry about banging up our stock from the inside, but you're still going to want to make sure it's 50-50 just so it fits through that opening as smooth as possible. And then one last thing that I definitely wanted to point out to you is, you know, how often do you have your 1022 broken down? And so anytime you pull the go to the trouble to pull the barrel and the receiver out of the stock. Before you put everything back together, you really want to make sure to get a good coating on the barrel and anything else that fits inside the stock that you normally can't get access to, because unless you take it all back apart again, it's going to be impossible to get to that. So I like to make sure I've got some extra protectant on the inside. In this case, I'm sticking to my tried and true rig. It's something that I've used since I was a kid on my blue steel. And so I'm just going to make sure I've got that extra coated that's going to fit inside the barrel. And then that bottom portion of the receiver and the trigger housing too, because it's not exposed normally, right? So this is just a great time to make sure you got all of those things that are going to be covered up or down inside the stock. You've got them good and greased up and protected. That's the most important thing. So whether you're using something like rig or a good old CLP, now's the time to do that. And I focus a lot on the barrel. So with that, we'll get to putting it in the stock. Okay, so now we're getting ready to mate the barrel and receiver back up inside of our nice hardwood stock. There's not a very elegant way to go about this, I'll say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my setup by the barrel. My safety's about 50-50. My pins are in. Just going to make sure real quick here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse what I did taking it out. So I'm going to start back here towards the rear of the stock. And I'm going to feed the receiver through and then the barrel. And just like that, she's back together almost. Remember our takedown screw here. I can get it started with my fingers. I'm going to take my flathead and then I'm going to try not to scratch up my stock. It would help if I'm not shaking. And I'm going to tighten that back down. No reason to over tighten it, just snug it up. And now that housing is all back together again. Before I put my barrel band back on, remember I wanted to cover all the stuff that was inside of the stock that I couldn't get to normally. So now I'm going to do the same here. Take a little extra CLP, or in this case rig, go over that area. It's hard not to do the whole thing. I get carried away, but just to cover it up. And then, as I mentioned before, I want to be very careful as I'm putting the barrel band back on, not to scratch my barrel. And I just want to slide it back down. And you'll see this lip here that it rests on ultimately. So as I bring it down over the barrel and the stock, I want to make sure it's fitting up snugly, nicely against that lip, which it seems like it is. And again, I'm taking my flathead and I'm snugging this up. I didn't have to take it out, so I don't have to tighten it up too far. And again, I don't want to overdo it. I just want to snug it up. And there we have it. We have a clean and lubed, protected Ruger 1022 carbine again. Hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this video. Hopefully I've pointed out some things that you may not have known already. If you did, great. Hopefully I covered the basis. If I missed anything, or if you wanted to see something specific, please leave us a note in the comments. We'd love to hear back from you. And if you liked what you see here today, please be sure and like the video and subscribe to our channel. We've got a lot of videos. As I've mentioned before, we're just kind of getting started here on YouTube, but we'd love your support, and we hope what you've liked what you've seen here today. Before we go, I did want to just point out something to you. So we went through all of that. I'm going to lock the charging handle back here to finish talking. Just to circumvent everything we just did and talked about, when I was growing up with this exact rifle, I never tore it down that way. And that's per the user manual. And I think I didn't tear it down per the user manual because it's just the way my dad showed me, right? And he wasn't wrong. You can actually clean this weapon fairly well without tearing it down all the way that we just did. And certainly not the bolt and charging hammer, as like I said, that goes beyond what the user manual says you need to do anyway. But I'll tell you what I used to do. Of course, making sure the firearm's unloaded. All I used to do is punch the barrel with my cleaning rod. I had one of those cleaning rods that came in, had the handle that would twirl around, the T handle that would twirl around on the end. It came in 3 sections, and I would simply punch the barrel. I would take some solvent, run it down through there, let it soak a few seconds, and start running cloths through there until they came out dry and they came out clean or mostly clean. Some debate, you may not ever get it completely clean, but that's the general goal. So I'd run my solvent with the rod through this way. I was never overly cautious with the crown because I wasn't even aware that that could be a thing at that time when I was a kid. But I used to punch the barrel this way, and then I'd get in with a cloth, just use some pads like I'd punch the barrel with. I'd soak it down with solvent and get in here and clean out the face of the bolt and inside this part of the chamber here and all of this in here. I would then take the solvent and wipe down the barrel real quick and the scope to get off any of my fingerprints that were visible. And I'd wipe that off until it was dry. And then I simply took my rig and wiped down all the metal that I could get to. And that was how I cleaned this 1022 for the longest time. So I'm not saying that that's the recommended way. I'm saying that that's the way that up until more recently I had always done it. I will say though, the advantages of taking it down like we did today is that you can expose those pieces that reside inside of the stock. And over the number of years, for example, that I've had this gun, even though it's in the safe a lot, or most of the time, you will get dust and dirt and gunpowder and carbon buildup down inside on the receiver and in the trigger guard over time if you haven't taken it down. So I'm not saying not to take it down, and I'm saying that in time you definitely want to take it down, but there is a way to clean it up and not have to do all that. So with that, I'll let you go. Again, like us if you've enjoyed this video and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.